Helen stepped into the living room, dragging her suitcase behind her. The moment she saw Michael's face, her stomach twisted in unease. He was grinning, looking far too pleased with himself. "Helen, you're back," he said, his voice too casual, too cheerful. Something about his tone sent warning bells ringing in her mind. She set her suitcase down carefully, her eyes narrowing. "I am," she replied slowly. "And what exactly is with that smile?" Michael shrugged, waving his hand in the air as if brushing off her question. Then, with a dramatic flourish, he added, "Oh, nothing much, just made a big business move while you were away." Helen's suspicion deepened. What kind of move? His grin widened as he leaned back against the couch, looking as though he had just won the lottery. "Your jewelry collection," he said, his voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "I sold it, every single piece." Helen froze, her heart slammed against her ribs as her breath caught in her throat. "And before you get upset," Michael continued, holding up a hand as if to calm her, "let me just say, you'll thank me later. Your jewels funded my new business empire." The words hit her like a slap. Her jewelry collection, the pieces she had spent years curating, some passed down from her mother and grandmother, others bought with her own hard-earned money. Every item held sentimental value, memories woven into gold and gemstones. And now, they were gone. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling with shock. Michael chuckled, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside her. "I sold them, Helen. Do you have any idea how much those diamonds were worth? More than enough to kickstart a business that's going to make us rich. It's brilliant, really. You should be proud." "Proud?" Helen's hands clenched into fists as anger surged through her veins like fire. "You had no right, Michael. That was my jewelry. Do you even realize what you've done?" He rolled his eyes, sighing as if she were being unreasonable. "Oh, come on, Helen. Half of those pieces were just sitting there, gathering dust. This way, they're actually being put to good use. You'll see, it's a smart investment." Helen felt her whole body tremble. She had always known Michael was ambitious, sometimes even ruthless in his pursuit of success. When they first met, she admired his drive, but over the years, she had begun to see the cracks. His charm masked a selfishness that knew no limits. And now, he had crossed the line. The jewelry wasn't just valuable, it was personal. Every necklace, every ring, every bracelet told a story, held a piece of her past, and he had sold them like they were nothing more than currency for his next business venture. But Michael had no idea. Helen had taken precautions. Months ago, after hearing about a string of burglaries in their neighborhood, she had installed tiny tracking devices in the clasps of her most valuable pieces, just in case. She forced herself to remain calm, swallowing the fury that threatened to explode. Michael thought he had won, but he was wrong. That night, Helen sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the empty drawer where her jewelry box had once been. The emptiness felt like a hollow pit in her chest. She took a deep breath, picked up her phone, and opened the tracking app. A map appeared on the screen, red dots scattered across the city. Her breath hitched, the signals were still active. One dot led to a jewelry consignment store downtown, another had already moved to a warehouse in the industrial district. Each piece was on a journey, changing hands like stolen treasure. A grim sense of satisfaction replaced her despair. Michael had underestimated her. She had proof. Without hesitation, she dialed a number. Megan answered on the second ring. "Hey, Helen, how was your trip?" Helen didn't waste a second. "Megan, you won't believe what Michael did." Her best friend groaned. "What now?" Helen explained everything, the sale, Michael's arrogance, the tracking devices. By the time she finished, Megan was fuming. "That's it, you need to go to the police," Megan said firmly. Helen exhaled. "I know, I'm going first thing in the morning." The next day, she walked into the police station, her fingers gripping her phone tightly. Her heart pounded, but she kept her head high. She wasn't going to let Michael get away with this. A kind-looking officer greeted her at the front desk. "How can we help you?" Helen swallowed hard. "I need to report a theft." "Your property?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "my jewelry collection. It was sold without my consent." The officer raised an eyebrow but nodded. "All right, let's get some details." She was led to a desk where she recounted everything, Michael's actions, the worth of her collection, and the tracking devices she had installed. When she showed the officer the app, his expression turned serious. "This is excellent evidence," he said, jotting down notes. "If these tracking devices are still active, we may be able to recover some of the items. Do you have a list of what was taken?" Helen pulled out a small notebook, carefully detailing each piece and its estimated value. The sapphire ring her grandmother had given her on her 80th birthday. The diamond bracelet her mother wore on her wedding day. The gold pendant she had bought after landing her first big job. More than just jewelry, pieces of her life, her memories, her history. Detective Carter, the officer assigned to her case, looked up from his notes. "We'll start by verifying the tracking signals. If the items are where you say they are, this could be a straightforward recovery. However, since your husband sold them without your consent, this also constitutes fraud. Are you willing to press charges?" Helen hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Yes, I want him held accountable." Detective Carter nodded. "Good, let's get started." As she walked out of the station, Helen felt lighter, stronger. She wasn't just a victim, she was taking control. Michael thought he had won. But this was just the beginning. I stood there for what felt like forever, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't just about getting my things back anymore. No, it was about something much bigger than that. It was about standing up for myself. For years, I had let Michael take from me my time, my trust, my security, but not anymore. I was done letting him walk all over me. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Detective Carter. His voice was calm, steady, but there was something heavy in his words. "Mrs. Parker, we've managed to recover 3 of your stolen items so far," he told me. "That includes the diamond bracelet and the sapphire ring. We're still tracking down the rest, but something else has come up." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean? What happened?" There was a brief pause before he continued. "We've found financial transactions linked to your husband's business that indicate fraudulent activity. Some of the funds are connected to the sale of your jewelry, but there are also other accounts involved that raise serious concerns. Because of this, we're expanding the investigation." I sat down, feeling my stomach twist into knots. This was worse than I thought. Michael hadn't just been selfish, he had been reckless, maybe even criminal. "Am I in trouble?" I asked carefully, my voice barely above a whisper. "As of now, no," Detective Carter reassured me, "but it's important that you cooperate fully. If you have any additional information, anything at all, let us know. Your husband's actions could have serious legal consequences." I thanked him and hung up, but my hands were shaking. What had Michael done? Stealing and selling my jewelry was one thing, but fraud, money laundering, how much worse could it get? I thought I knew the man I had married, but standing there in my quiet home, I realized I had been living with a stranger. Later that evening, I called my best friend, Megan. "The police think Michael's involved in something big," I told her, pacing back and forth. "They're looking into his business." Megan didn't even sound surprised. "Honestly, Helen, I've been expecting this. The way he acts, like rules don't apply to him." It was only a matter of time before it caught up with him. But how did I not see this coming? My voice cracked as I spoke. I trusted him, I built a life with him, and now, it feels like everything was a lie. Megan softened her tone. "Helen, you couldn't have known. He's good at hiding things. People like him, they manipulate, they deceive, but this isn't your fault. You're doing the right thing by standing up for yourself." Her words gave me a little comfort, but the anger and betrayal still boiled inside me. That night, Michael finally came home. I could tell right away that something was different. The usual smug confidence in his posture was gone. Instead, his movements were stiff, his expression tense. "I know what you've been doing," he said as he walked into the room, his voice sharp like a knife. "The police, the bank, do you have any idea what kind of damage you've caused?" I stood my ground. "I didn't cause this, Michael, you did, and now you're finally facing the consequences." He let out a bitter laugh. "You think you've won? This isn't over, Helen." I met his gaze without flinching. "You're right, it's not over, but it's out of your hands now." For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes, fear. The next morning, my phone rang again. It was Detective Carter. "Mrs. Parker, we've recovered more of your jewelry." The items were traced to a private auction house downtown. A wave of relief washed over me. "Does that mean I'll be getting them back soon?" I asked, my voice trembling with hope. "Yes, we're working on the legal process to return them to you, But there's more. Michael's financial records show evidence of tax evasion and embezzlement. The case is growing. At this point, nothing surprised me anymore. I thanked the detective and hung up, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt a new sense of determination. I couldn't let Michael's mistakes ruin me. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer Megan had recommended. "You've already taken the right steps by going to the authorities," the lawyer told me, flipping through her notes. "We can file for a formal separation and start securing your personal assets." Hearing those words was both terrifying and empowering. I never thought I'd be here, sitting in a lawyer's office, planning to leave my husband, but I had no choice. I needed to protect myself. "What about his business?" I asked. "Could his crimes affect me financially?" "Potentially," she admitted. "That's why it's important to establish legal boundaries now. If his business goes under investigation, we need to make sure you're not dragged into it." That evening, I sat at the dining table, surrounded by paperwork. When Megan called to check on me, I actually surprised myself with my response. "I'm okay," I told her. "For the first time in weeks, I feel like I'm in control. It's not easy, but I know I'm doing the right thing." "You are," Megan said firmly, "and you're stronger than you realize, Helen. Remember that." 2 days later, I met with Detective Carter at the police station. "We've traced almost all of your jewelry," he told me. "The auction house and consignment stores are cooperating. And as for Michael, between the unauthorized sale of your jewelry and the fraud, the district attorney is preparing charges. He won't walk away from this." Hearing those words gave me a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, but mostly, a sense of justice. Michael had hurt me in more ways than I could count, but at least now, he would have to face the consequences. That night, Michael came home late. I was sitting in the living room, my legal documents spread out in front of me. When he walked in and saw them, his face hardened. "What is all this?" he demanded. I didn't even look up. "Divorce papers." His eyes widened in shock. "You're divorcing me?" "Yes, Michael," I said, finally meeting his gaze. "This is the end. I won't let you drag me down with you." For the first time, Michael had nothing to say. He turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I let out a long, deep breath. This wasn't just the end of my marriage, it was the beginning of something else, something I hadn't felt in years: freedom.